Hi, my name is Glenn Rafter. This is my father Thomas. We're farming here in Triplet, County Wexford, in partnership together with my mother Bernie and brother Gavin. We run a mixed tillage and sheep enterprise on 140 acres, and this year we had 175 ewes went to the ram. We scanned 2.1, just over 2, fractionally over 2 when we include the barn ewes. We had a barn rate of 4.5%, so we had a good scanning rate. We normally scan over 2. We have a good lot of belt layer genetics in the ewes here, so we have a prolific flock, and as a result of that we have a lot of cross fostering and we rear a lot of pets, and we try to make an enterprise of the pets in its own right, to try increase output as best we can on the farm here. We usually leave the male lambs entire. We leave them as ram lambs when we put them onto the lamb neck, onto the feeders. We find we get better growth rates with them that way. We usually, whichever comes first, whether it be 35 days of age, or if they're eating 250 grams a meal, so we wean them off the lamb neck. Depending on the lambs, if they're very strong, it'll be 35 days. If we have a few that have reached the age and they're a little bit smaller, we'll give them a few extra days on the feeder to see will it come on a little bit more. I use a marking system, different colours every 3 days, a bit like a rattle system, to identify the lambs, to know what age they are. We usually go by the age scenario rather than how much meal they're eating, because it can be hard to gauge if each lamb is eating 250 grams or not. All of the usual husbandry practices remain the same with those lambs. The most important thing, I know everyone will be already fully aware of it, is to get a good portion of colostrum into them at first. We'd always try to get the ewe's first milk, and if that's not possible, we sometimes use cow's colostrum that we get off a nearby dairy farmer, and as a last resort we will use the artificial colostrum, but we prefer to get the real thing if we could at all. We find that with the lambs on that feeding system, as we do pick out the stronger lambs, the lambs with the best growth potential, they tend to leave us a reasonable margin. We feed them an ad lib 18% crude protein lamb creep with plenty of soya, and they're offered straw ad lib as well. And as I said before, the 35 days before they're weaned off the milk powder. So all in all, we find that these lambs can be some of the first lambs to go off the farm, the strongest of them possibly, some of the earlier born ones obviously. I think we're getting on well enough from the point of view that the system we're running with the artificial feeders is kind of helping us to manage the extra lambs quite well and efficiently. I suppose a lot of sheep farmers wouldn't necessarily want to be scanning over 2 or 2.1 lambs to the ewe, and in a lot of cases it makes sense, as labour can be an issue. Some lads, I suppose, maybe working on the farm by themselves, and it's not really realistic. Give more hardship than anything. But if you do, we're lucky here that we have two or three of us around a lot of the time that we're able to work that. So it works for us, but every farm is different. It might not necessarily be the case somewhere else.
I'd have to say that a good lowland, good lowland well-bred ewes, like any good lowland ewe worth their salt, I feel, should be able to rear 2 lambs, and it seems an awful waste when you have to let some of them off with one, and I think that any flock, like, I've always thought like that if every single that's born in a flock has to stay a single, your weaning rate drops, and it's a highlight for me during the lambing to get as many as possible triplets onto singles. It's great to see a ewe going out with two and she only had one, like, because it just brings up your numbers at the end of the day, like.
And then the artificial rear really is a backup for extra, really. It's bonus, really. Like, your main objective is to get two lambs to the field with the ewe insofar as possible.
In general, the only ewes that we would have going to the field with one lamb would be just something wrong with them. They'd have a side gone or just not able to rear two. Like, we still try at all costs to minimise the artificially reared lambs. So, like, literally any ewe that goes to the field with one lamb is just not able to rear two.
If our cross fostering fails and a week in the adoption unit, the fostering unit doesn't work, our last resort with a ewe going to the field with two lambs is we put this bucket around her head. It seems unusual. It would be an unorthodox approach. We find it works very well. The ewe can still eat and feed, no problem to her, and the beauty of it is she can't see her lambs, as she can only look forward when they're suckling her, so she's not able to look around and, say, poke the one that she doesn't like, the one that's adopted onto her. Sometimes we leave this on almost up to shearing time because it doesn't hold them back in any shape or form. It just stops them from seeing the lambs, and they're able to go ahead with that. Yeah, so this is some of our equipment. We have two ewe, two feeders, and one smaller 25, 50. We have 60 litres capacity, and we find that usually, if we had a high of about 50 or low 50s number of lambs, just about capacity there, and that's going to be the upper limit of what we'd ever have anyway of pets. This is just a typical fruit tray that we use when we're trying to cross foster to catch the fluids from the ewe when she's lambing down, and usually fairly successful approach when trying to foster a lamb onto a single ewe. And then if that doesn't work, all else fails, we have our foster and adoption unit here. We have 3 units. It'd be a bad time if we were had 3 ewes in at the one time, but it can happen. Depending on breeding ewe numbers and scanning rate, we'd usually rear somewhere in the region of 35 to 50 pet lambs per year here. And I suppose we've been doing this for about 5 years, and over the years we've kind of refined the operation a bit. We would always try to select the strongest lambs to be reared this way because it's a high input and expensive way of rearing lambs as opposed to grass-fed lamb off the grass later on in the year. So because of that, we try to select ram lambs, and if we were taking a lamb from a triplet ewe, we would always try to select the biggest lamb and leave the 2 smaller, and hopefully the more even pair of lambs to go with the ewe out to the field.